Could an ink blending brush really change your life? Stick around and let's find out together. Hey, thanks for hanging out. My name is Amy England and welcome to Scrap This, Save That, a channel designed to teach you the basics of paper crafting. Today I'm checking out the life-changing blender brushes by Picket Fence Studios. You can buy these brushes in the whole set of 10, or they have two separate sets you can buy, one with the larger brushes and one with the smaller brushes. The bigger brushes are great for inking backgrounds, while the smaller brushes are really good for stencils and smaller areas that you want to ink. You can get different ink coverages depending on how you hold the brush. If you hold it by the handle, it's very, very bendy. There's my official word, bendy, and you get a much lighter coverage. If you hold it by the handle and maybe put your finger on it, then you're going to get a little bit more of a medium coverage. And if you hold it right directly on its head rather than on the handle, you're going to get a much heavier, thicker coverage of ink. These brushes are super easy to clean with soap and water, and you can even use one dirty brush to scrub another one to get them super clean. I'm going to start with a panel of white cardstock cut to 5.5 by 4.25 inches and just play around with a little bit of ink. I'm using the same colors I used a few weeks back in a different video I did about the Pink and Main ergonomic blender brushes, just to get a true comparison. And I am going to have a comparison video coming probably sometime in the next few weeks as I use both of these sets of brushes more and get more familiar with them. I'm using Distress Oxide inks in one of my favorite color combos, Cracked Pistachio, Mermaid Lagoon, and Blueprint Sketch. I made sure to load the brush with plenty of ink, and then I've noticed that it seems to be most effective when I'm using the brush in a circular motion on the cardstock. I can wipe the brush on a microfiber cloth between colors so that I don't get things mixed up in the ink pads. I'm wiping down my work surface, and then I'm going to go in with the second color, the Mermaid Lagoon, and get a nice blend between the two. Then I'll go back in with the Cracked Pistachio and kind of blend them even better together. Next, it's going to be time to come in with my Blueprint Sketch, the third color, and get that on the paper nice and saturated, get things moving around. And then once I'm happy with that, I'll get that Mermaid Lagoon again, cover that white line that's there, and make everything blend pretty together so that it's nice and smooth and looks great. Once I have everything blended and I'm happy with my result, I'll go ahead and put everything away and grab out my Tonic guillotine paper trimmer, and I'm cutting 1/4 of an inch off of one side and one end of the panel. That's going to leave me with a panel that's 5.25 by 4 inches. That way when I put it on an A2 sized card base, I'm going to have a nice border all the way around the card. I'm using a stamp by Tailored Expressions called Birthday Background, and I'll leave a link for that in the description box below. It's a rubber cling stamp, so it's thicker than clear acrylic stamps. I'll take the foam pad out of the stamp positioner to use the rubber cling stamp. Since the stamp is larger than the cardstock, the magnet's not going to work to hold it down. I put a small piece of tape on the back and then line it up on the guidelines just in case it comes up when the stamp is positioned, and then the tape will hold the panel in place for me. I'm stamping with another oxide ink. This one is Chipped Sapphire. I chose this shade because it's slightly darker than my darkest blended shade. Since this is such a big stamp, it's going to take a couple of times to get the impression nice and crisp the way I want it to look. Once I'm done stamping, the paper is going to pop right off of the stamp positioner and it'll be ready to go to build the card. I'm using my ATG gun to mount my panel onto an A2 size card base, making sure, as always, that the card base is facing the right direction before I tape anything down. And the first card is done. I actually used this one to give to my daughter for her birthday this year. Time to work on the second panel now. I want to see how these brushes hold up to the regular Distress inks instead of just the oxides. So I'm using a combination of Squeezed Lemonade, Spiced Marmalade, and Candied Apple. The same combination I used in the Pink and Main ergonomic blender brush, boy that's hard to say, video that I did a few weeks ago. This took a few minutes, so I sped the video up quite a bit. There was lots of circular motion and lots of blending. I would say this probably took me about 10 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, all said and done, just because it seems like the colors, I don't know if it was because they were dark or because they weren't oxides, but they were going on a little bit slower and a little bit lighter than the oxides did. After I gave time for my panel to dry, I went to trim it. I was going to trim it down just like the other one, and I saw that red ink had somehow gotten into the yellow ink, so I just trimmed it off and made a different plan for my card. It's always a good idea to embrace mistakes. I ended up trimming it down to 2.5 inches wide. I'm using another rubber cling stamp. This one is called Insightful Meadows, and it's by Unity Stamp Company. Once again, the stamp is too big to use a magnet, so I'm just going to take the paper and butt it up against the corner, so that way if it moves when I need to restamp it, I could just put it exactly right back in the same spot. Once I have my paper in the right position, then I'm going to take the stamp and just kind of jiggle it around and move it around until I get it exactly centered just the way I want it to be. I'm using the VersaFine Onyx Black ink again for a nice dark impression on those really bright colors. I really like the way the VersaFine ink, the super dark black, stands out on the colors, so that's why I end up using VersaFine probably more than any other black ink. When I was cutting this panel earlier, I also cut 1/4 inch off of the bottom of it, so that way I'll have a nice white border on 3 sides of my card base, and then a larger white space on one side so that I can stamp a sentiment. I'm using the Sentiment Thinking of You that's part of the Shadow Play stamp set by Altenew. I did check and that one's no longer available, but if you look, you've probably got plenty of cool sentiments that you can use on your existing stamp sets. This is just one that I happen to have that was closest. This time I'll put the foam pad back in the stamping platform. Since I'm using a thinner, clear acrylic stamp, it just fits right back in there. Then I'm going to move my sentiment around till I get it placed just exactly like I want it. I can check the guidelines on the stamp positioner tool to make absolutely sure it's straight. And then I'm going to give it a couple of stamps with some of the VersaFine ink just to make sure it's nice and crisp. I love using a stamp positioner because I have the option of re-inking if I need to. I hated stamping before there was such a thing as a stamp positioner. Card number 2 is done and in the books along with card number 1. Here's a quick peek at both of those cards together. Now, I don't know if my life has been changed, but I will say I really do like the life-changing blender brushes. And I have another video coming soon using those smaller brushes with stencils. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I'd like to invite you to join the community by subscribing, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you'll know when the next video is posted and ready to watch. See you soon!